Hey, this is Rick Bone with Underwater Explorer. We're going to be diving someplace new today. We're going to be diving in Barbados, which is the easternmost island in the Caribbean. It's also the most developed island. Its population is about 280,000 people. It's about 21 miles long and 14 miles wide. Now, what would you say the literacy rate of a country like this would be? 20, 30%? Actually, it's 99.3%. The children are required to go to school from age 3 to 16. And if they want to go to college, they can go from 16 to 18. And then if they want to go to the university, they can go from 18 to 20. And the tuition for college in Barbados is, believe it or not, $350 a year. Let's take a look. This is our first dive in Barbados, and we're in about 40 feet of water, and the visibility is also about 40 feet. These soft corals were quite plentiful, and that is a basket sponge, and that is pink coral. Very unusual. I've never seen that before. And that's what a basket coral should look like. There was very little current that day, which is typical of Barbados diving. The blue soft corals were plentiful, and these guys were all over the reef. That's a little horse-eyed jack going in there, and some more pink coral, although that had a little blue tint to it. And that's brain coral that makes a very good hiding place. And the sea fans also offered some camouflage to this guy. And these bottom feeders were just dwelling apart. Now, we stayed at the All Seasons Europa Resort in Barbados. Very good value for the money. Very clean rooms. They recently had a renovation. The pool was great, cool. And there were 19 of us from Ski Scuba Center in Knoxville, Tennessee that went on this trip. And the food was excellent. The first night was a sit-down dinner, and from there on it was strictly buffet, which we liked even better. That little guy was all around us. And Mr. Monkey was right outside the motel room, and if you offered any kind of an apple or banana, he'd come back the very next morning at almost the exact same time. Now we're getting ready to go to the beach area where the dive shop was, and we dove with high tide divers in Barbados. They were excellent, very professional, right on the beach. And that is the dive shop. And the boat loads right from the beach in calm weather. And there are our instructors giving us the details of the day. And if you'll notice in the background, the ocean is very calm that day. And this dive was in about 50 to 55 feet of water. And the visibility was greatly improved to about 60 or 70 feet. That's some more pink coral. And these guys are similar to what you find in Florida diving, although that soft coral is not, had a blue tint to it. And the coral on this particular reef rove up about 8 to 10 feet off the bottom. Although we buddied up, we stayed in two groups of about 8 or 9 people each, so the instructor could keep tabs on most of us. The diving is very relaxing. There you see the line guy. He's the only one that's never lost. And now we're getting ready to dive on a wreck, and this is about 100 feet of water, 90 to 100. And it's one of the most diveable and famous wrecks in the Caribbean. It has a mast that comes within 15 feet of the surface, and it's about 300 feet long.
Welcome to Rick Bowen's Underwater Explorer. Come with us as we dive the Bahamas and Cozumel, explore massive coral formations, caves, and underwater swim-throughs on this episode of Rick Bowen's Underwater Explorer.
Hey, this is Rick Bowen with Underwater Explorer. The longevity rate for people in Barbados, the women, the average age is 94 and the average man is 87. It's quite a very clean island and very well kept up. And if you'd like to go to Barbados, dive with high tide divers. Give Gavin a call. You'll have a great time. Again, we're on a wreck dive in about 80 to 85 feet of water. That's looking up toward the surface. And our diver's exploring around one of the pillars that comes within 15 feet of the surface. And it's one of the most famous Caribbean dives, and the ship was about 300 feet long. The older a shipwreck is, the more coral grows on it, and therefore more fish live in it. And this wreck went down a little bit off the coast, and it was in shallow water, so after a while they drug it to deep water, and it sits with its stern in about 100 feet of water. Here some divers want to explore inside the wreck. Very safe wreck. There's no glass in it. All the windows are perfectly so you could swim right through. And that's the mast that comes within 15 feet of the surface, and also the guideline down to the boat. And we just come up, everybody's getting adjusted, and that's the top of the mast. The water clarity was about 80 or 90 feet, very clear. This is our second dive on the wreck, and you can see the ladder. Thousands of reef fish all over this wreck. And sometimes on this wreck, because of its depth, there were gusts of current that would last maybe 2 or 3 seconds, and then it would grow calm again. And that's some of the superstructure of the wreck. Beautiful pink soft corals. And that's the very top of the mast that comes within 15 feet of the surface. And there are of course buoys you can tie up to, so you don't have to anchor on the wreck. And this wreck is so popular, you best get there early because boats tie up to it continually throughout the day. These are sergeant majors that are very territorial, and that's of course a grouper in the center of your screen. And that's an outcropping of the mast. And divers, upon returning to the surface, simply circle around that mast so as not to come up too quick. And remember, you only come up as fast as your slowest bubbles when you exhale. This little turtle was about the only one we saw there, but he was very curious. You're not afraid of divers. Of course, they know they're protected. These sea fans were quite plentiful. And the visibility that day was about 70 to 80 feet. It's kind of like swimming through the Grand Canyon with all these reef structures. Now we're in probably one of the best dives of the week, and this is in a bay area where 7 shipwrecks are very close together. The visibility was right at 100 feet, the clearest diving all week. That's of course more brain coral. These wrecks were in a depth of from 30 feet to about 52 feet. You know, to see this on TV is great, but you really want to get down with it and do it yourself. If you have an interest in being a certified diver, call Jimmy down at Ski and Scuba in Knoxville, Tennessee, and he can get you introduced to one of the greatest sports of all time. This is right in the midweek dive, and more of what we've seen before with the blue corals, the soft corals. Lots of small fish schools. I think the biggest fish we saw all week was about probably 1 to 1.5 feet long, and you'll see those later in the show. All kinds of nooks and crannies to hide to in the reef. Now this diver is trying to stay off the coral. Of course, that's what you have your buoyancy control for. You want to be totally neutral. You don't want to sink and you don't want to go to the surface. It's called neutral buoyancy. And here we've come up from our dive. And the crew at high tide takes care of everything. You never have to lift a tank. They'll help you put it on, they take it off, they guide you back to your seat. Almost effortless diving. Now this again, we're in this bay and these catamarans are all around us. It's probably the most popular dive place and snorkeling in the area. And we're in about 30 feet of water here, crystal clear. Visibility over 100 feet. And there's 7 wrecks in this area within 100 yards. And these are our first soft corals, again at about 30 feet of water, and we'll go down to about 52 feet. There were more fish here than any other dive we did on Barbados. And this is such a popular dive that we requested to come back here the end of our diving also. There are tons of snorkelers up above us. And it's strange because we looked up and none of them have any fins on. And this because they don't want people finning off into the horizon and losing people. So they only had mask and snorkel and a flotation device. And here you can look in and penetrate the wrecks. And then again is some of the superstructure of one of the wrecks. And these wrecks were smaller, anywhere from 50 feet long to a little over 100. These sergeant majors are so protective of their territory. If you get within 3 feet of it, they'll come out and nip you on the hand. All sorts of small life. Great for macro photographers. And there was a slight current on this system. Many photographers on the wrecks. And the highlight were the fish schools. There's one of the sergeant majors trying to charge my camera. And a few of the divers are going up the surface line. We're in about 52 feet of water on this dive. And you'll notice the great clarity. It's just a very slow swim around these wrecks. And they're all within one tank of air. You can see all 7 of them. And this is inside one of the wrecks where sunlight can still penetrate. Some divers elect to wear wetsuits, and I did not. I find them a little confining, but the water is 82 degrees, so it's almost like bath water. But oddly enough, to someone from Barbados, they think they're freezing in that kind of water, so they all wear wetsuits. It's just really whatever you're conditioned to. You can spend as much time as you want to on each individual wreck, and if you lose your group, they're right in front of you. These are some worms that came out of hiding. And now we're inside one of the wrecks, and that's where the schools are most plentiful. And this is on the outer fringe of one of the wrecks, and that's the propeller of probably the biggest wreck that we saw. Fish prefer undercover on that particular wreck. And you'll generally see more fish inside the wreck than you will outside of it because of the protective cover. Again, there's snorkelers all above us that are very curious, but they can't quite make it all the way down to the wreck. But the water's so clear they can see most of it. This is right under the stern of the wreck. You can get a general idea of the size of the wreck. And this is the remains of one of the wrecks, one of the smaller wrecks. All the divers are gathered together to see one of the eels. That's a puffer fish. That's one of the biggest I've ever seen. He was almost 2 feet long. These are sheep's head. And as I've said, the schools of fish were the highlight of this wreck. This is one of the medium-sized wrecks. It's in about 40 feet of water. And that's the engine room of one of those wrecks.
Welcome to Rick Bowen's Underwater Explorer. Come with us as we dive the Bahamas and Cozumel, explore massive coral formations, caves, and underwater swim-throughs on this episode of Rick Bowen's Underwater Explorer.
You know, you can dive Barbados any time of year. The temperatures are normally anywhere from 80 to 90 degrees, and the ocean water temperature is 78 to 82 degrees, so very comfortable. Again, we're in the Bay Area, right off Barbados, and this is probably the most popular dive site. It's right next to Bridgetown, and these are all snorkelers. And we're getting ready to come out of our water. And notice the water clarity. This is our dive captain. We're very close to land. And there's Duck. And all the divers had a great time. This is the oldest church in Barbados. And it's very well maintained, still in use. And the inside was crystal clean. And these are the grounds of the church. And it was built in the 1600s. This is the graveyard. And we were on a general tour of the island of Barbados. That's a pufferfish that's been stuffed. And Barbados is mountainous in places. And this, we came up to a rise, and there are tons of little stores that you can shop in, all very colorful. This is the northern coast of Barbados, and it's considerably rougher than the west coast in which we dived. And in a second you'll see why. You really couldn't get a dive boat in that kind of water. Look at the tremendous wave action. Those guys are shooting up about 50 feet. If you ever got stuck in that kind of surge, it'd probably be it. But very colorful. Now this is a cave on the island of Barbados. It's called Animal Flower Cave. This is a cannon from one of the shipwrecks. Again, you see more wave action on the northern coast of Barbados. For obvious reasons, that area is never dived. But if you're in Barbados, be sure and take the tour of the island. Many carriers offer that. And many souvenirs can be had at several points along the tour. Shells, necklaces, bracelets. And you can see the tremendous view in Barbados. This is from one of the higher elevations. I had to use a telephoto on this one. And these are some of the surfers along the coast of Barbados. And they have a surfing contest here once a year, and the waves get to be huge at this particular time of year. Hey, this is Rick Bone with Underwater Explorer. I get questions regarding wetsuits. Do you really need to wear a wetsuit in Barbados? Generally, if the water is less than 80 degrees, if you do repetitive dives more than 2 a day, you'll probably need a wetsuit, either a 3mm or a 5mm. If it's above 80 degrees, like 82 degrees, like it was this trip, I prefer not to use a wetsuit. The water feels like bath water. But in everybody's mind, it's their own judgment, whether you're cold-natured or warm-natured. Either way, enjoy the trip. Have a great time in Barbados. Hey, this is Rick Bone with Underwater Explorer. If you want to be a certified diver, just call your local dive shop or the YMCA, and I'll see you next time on Underwater Explorer.